Welcome back to our fifth part of our viewer arsenal series, where we take arsenals from you guys, the viewers, and we put them into our 6 bowling ball categories and help you determine what your next bowling ball should be, or at least what kind of bowling ball it should be. Remember, if you want to be on this, make sure 1, you subscribe, and then 2, drop an email in our bio. We have our email address in that bio, and then just drop your arsenal in that, and then we will include it in a future video. Thank you guys for submitting all of these awesome arsenals, so let's get right into the video. Moving on to our next category, we have Antonio, and Antonio didn't give any stats about himself. That's a-okay, but we only have 3 bowling balls here, so I always like having just these smaller arsenals in here to be able to showcase what you can do when you're just starting off your bowling career, bowling adventure, whatever it may be. Starting off with the Hammer Scandal. This is an old ball, very, very old ball. As you can tell, it actually has like the old carbon fiber hammer logo on it of like, this ball was supposed to last for like 3 years or you get your money back or something. It was pretty much a middle of the road medium smooth ball. It's very close to what the Hammerhead is today, or like even what the Hazmat Solid was. So that's going to be a stronger medium and smooth ball. Next one up is we have the Honey Badger Claw Solid. This was an old 900 global ball. This was, again, a medium smooth ball. It was a very mild asim. It was a pretty weak asymmetrical solid ball at the time, so it goes well after the Scandal. And then finally, we have the Track Theorem, which we know and love. We're going to put that right in the strong and sharp category. So this is what your arsenal looks like right now, Antonio. What could you get next that would really be able to round it off well? I'd recommend either a medium sharp ball or a weakened sharp ball. Having a good weaker shiny ball because you have a couple medium smooths covered. So you could go with something like the Scorpion Strike. You could go with like a Hammer Anger. You could go with like a Road Warrior from Storm. If you want to go to weakened sharp, you have a few options in there, nothing too crazy though. I think the ones that I mentioned previously are going to fit a little bit better with what you have, but hope this helps. Moving on, we are on to Barry, who is a one-handed righty, throws at about 15.5 miles an hour, so pretty mediocre speed, middle of the road speed at the end of the day, but has, what do we have, 8 bowling balls here, all Storm, Roto, and 900 global bowling balls, so let's throw them in the right categories. We'll start with some ones that we already know to get a baseline. High Road Pearl, we've seen the Phase 5 before, we've seen the Ion Pro before, we've seen that Ion Max before, we've seen the Summit Ascent, and then I don't think we've actually put any of these into their spots. So there we go. We have the starting lineup: Ion Max and Strong Smooth, Summit Ascent and Medium Smooth, Phase 5, Ion Pro, and then High Road Pearl. So we have an infinite physics that is definitely a strong and sharp ball, but right on the edge between strong and sharp and strong and smooth. This is basically the new physics blackout, except this one was a little bit later and rounder than the blackout. So I see that as your one strong and sharp ball right now. Absolute Power, that goes in the strong and smooth category, except it goes very, very late in the strong and smooth category. It's going to go way after the Ion Max. This one honestly could, well, actually, no, we're going to backtrack. We're putting the Absolute Power in the medium and smooth category instead. This is a really, really weak asymmetrical bowling ball. I personally have it very close to the Phase 2 at the end of the day. And then Summit Peak, we are going to put the Summit Peak in front of the Phase 5. That Summit Peak is an insanely early Pearl ball. Really, really good for league shots, though. So there we go, Barry. These are all of your bowling balls. Overall, this is as rounded as you can get with this many bowling balls. You have every category covered minus urethane, which you don't really need covered, especially if you bowl league. So overall, if this is what you like right now, the only things I'd be worried about, the infinite physics is getting a little old. I know mine is starting to puke out on me a little bit. Otherwise, if you want another weakened sharp ball, could work. If you want a different strong and sharp ball, you have the physics blackout to perfectly replace the infinite. Otherwise, you could get like an Equinox or an Attention Star to fit that category too. Otherwise, this is very well rounded so far with how many bowling balls you have. Nice work. All right, the next arsenal up is Bob, who is a righty balanced senior. So that's something we're going to keep in the back of the head while we make this arsenal. But we have a few interesting new bowling balls on this list. Let's put some things into categories that we know of that we've already talked about before on the channel. Black Widow 3.0, definitely strong smooth. Hammer Effect, definitely a strong and sharp ball. Phase AI in the medium and sharp category. We have, that's really all of the other categories that we can cover. Primal Shock, we're going to put in medium smooth already. And then let's start off from the top. We're starting off with a weird one. This is the first time we've seen one of the new swag bowling balls on the list. This is the Craze Pearl. This is the weakest one on the list. That is definitely a weak and sharp bowling ball. Next up, we have the Phase 4. Phase 4 versus Phase AI. I always had the Phase 4 as a little bit later than the Phase AI. I did a comparison against all of the Phase bowling balls. Go check that out on the channel if you want to see all 6 of them against each other. But that's really where I saw the P4. Then coming up next, we have the Ricochet Pearl. I see the Ricochet Pearl, honestly, as ahead of both Phase balls. I see it as in front of both phase balls and also smoother. This Ricochet Pearl was weird though, so that's really where I'm seeing that guy. Hammer Anger is coming up next. I believe we have the Hammer Anger in our weak and sharp category. Very, very strong in our weak and sharp category. Definitely earlier than the Craze Pearl. Although that Craze Pearl is very, very smooth though. Even though it hooks late, it is very smooth. Black Widow Mania coming up next. I have the Mania right after the Hammer Effect. Some people have them flip-flopped. It really depends on how you get them both drilled. But then I have the Origin coming up next. We're going to put the Origin actually as the earliest strong and sharp bowling ball. It is much earlier than both the Effect and the Mania. Speaking of Black Widow bowling balls, we have the Hybrid. We have the Black Widow Hybrid coming out next. That is actually going to go in front of the Effect and in front of the Black Widow Mania. And then finally, Attention Star. Attention Star is going to be the weakest out of the bunch. So, Bob, you have a ton of strong and sharp bowling balls, although they are some of the best ones on the market. You have a couple Black Widows in here. You have the Effect. And then you have the Origin and the Attention Star. Those are arguably 5 of the best shiny balls on the market today. But then outside of that, on the medium sharp end, you have a lot of shiny balls too, with the Ricochet, the AI, and the Phase 4. So what I would recommend is a couple of solid bowling balls, a couple of smoother bowling balls. Something to pair alongside the Primal Shot could be something like a Summit Ascent. Otherwise, if you want a weak and smooth ball, the Ion Pro can fit this slot really well. Otherwise, if you want stronger, you can go with like a Phase 2. You could go with something like a Hammerhead or a GB5 to pair with that Primal Shock. Overall, as a senior, it makes sense that shiny balls are going to be a little bit better for you. That's a-okay. However, I'd recommend one more smooth ball in there to really round things out a little bit better. Moving on to our next arsenal, we have Dylan Fritz, and Dylan has an interesting task for us. So first, he says he's two-handed, 17 miles an hour, probably a little bit on the rev dominant side, but not too bad. But his ask is choosing 5 balls for nationals. So we're going to be doing that. We have nationals in Baton Rouge. I know a little bit more about it now because we are recording this on 3/29. So hopefully Dylan hasn't gone to nationals already. Hopefully he goes a little bit later. But let's first categorize and then let's pick a couple balls that'll be good for nationals. So starting off at the top, we have a lot of older balls in here, which is kind of interesting, and then a couple newer ones. Also, a lot of orange bowling balls I noticed as I was getting them all together, so kind of ironic. I doubt it was on purpose, but kind of funny. Starting off, we have the High Road Nano. The High Road Nano is a medium smooth ball, in my opinion. It was an OG High Road core with a really, really massive nano cover stock on it, so massive cover, tiny core, excuse me. So I see that as a medium smooth. Let's put a couple other balls into categories that we know, like the IQ being weak smooth, Optimum Idol Pearl being medium sharp, Jekyll Onyx being a strong smooth. I see an IQ Ruby down here in the weak and sharp. There's an old Pitch Black in the urethane slot. And then we have a clone, which we're going to put in the strong and sharp category. So let's start from here then. Starting off, we're starting with an interesting one, the Storm Pro Motion. This ball was wonky. This was a left-hander's dream come true. So if Dylan was a lefty, I'd already say bring this to nationals and buy 5 more. But this ball didn't hook much. It was very, very smooth down lane. It almost acted like urethane for most people. The cover stock was so strong, and the core wasn't that strong at the end of the day. I'm going to put it into the weak and smooth category, but it's going to be the strongest ball in the weak and smooth category. It could also probably fit in the medium smooth close to the High Road Nano, but that's where I'm going to put it for now. You can put a lot of surface on this thing, by the way, to get like a urethane-like reaction, which is kind of cool. Next one up, we have the IQ Tour Nano. This was an IQ core with a nano cover stock. This one's very, very old. I actually see this. I'm going to put this above the High Road Nano in terms of how early it hooks. They're both weaker bowling balls in the medium smooth category because of those cores, but I'm going to put the IQ above the High Road. All right, we're going to move the Venom Recoil up next. Another older ball, another very, very smooth ball. This one from Motiv. Very mild asymmetrical Venom bowling ball. I am going to put this one actually in front of both of the IQ Nano and High Road Nano. Now, the Venom Recoil cover stock isn't as strong, but it still hooked pretty early. That was in the days where Motiv balls hooked earlier than everything else on the market. So I'm going to put the Venom Recoil there. Moving on, we have the Parallax Effect. The Parallax Effect was off of one of the worst storm balls of the last 5 to 10 years, the OG Parallax. I am going to put that one. It wanted to be above the clone. It was supposed to be, but then it wasn't. It was super long and sharp. So we're going to put it after the clone. Moving on, we have the Eternity Pie. The Eternity Pie by far and away is weaker than the Jackal Onyx. No questions about it. Next, we have the Pride Dynasty. So the Pride Dynasty is actually going to go in front of the others I mentioned. The Dynasty is one of the earlier hooking Motiv balls on the market. Was on the market, just got discontinued. May it rest in peace. But then moving on, we have the Idle Helios. I have the Idle Helios as earlier than the other 3 balls we mentioned, but after the Pride Dynasty. So there's a lot of orange balls together. Kind of funny. The Idle Helios was a remake of the OG Idol, except it did not roll like an Idol. It was weirdly sharp when it saw friction, but it also hooked early. Very interesting. Very odd play. It wasn't great. I have one of my highest sets ever with that ball, but overall it just wasn't ideal. Next up, Virtual Energy Blackout. The Vibo is actually going to go in front of the other 2 Storm and Roto balls, the Clone and the Parallax Effect. Last but not least, we have the Phase 2. The Phase 2 is going to go right after the Helios. However, they did hook in very similar areas of the lane. So there is everything. So Dylan has a ton of medium and smooth bowling balls, 6 of them to be exact. Almost half of the arsenal is medium smooth. That's okay. There's a lot of good ones in here, but yet a lot of old ones. The only things that are missing right now for a general bag would be some shiny bowling balls, has a lot of strong and sharp bowling balls, has the Idle Pearl as a medium sharp, which is a really strong pearl at the end of the day, and then an IQ Ruby. You might need like a Road Warrior to fit in between the 2 because there's a big gap between the Optimum Pearl and the IQ Ruby. But let's look at Nationals. What should Dylan bring for Nationals? So in my opinion, with how Nationals is this year in Baton Rouge, very, very tight down lane, I would recommend being a two-hander, bring a Pitch Black, bring a Urethane, gonna be needed. I personally think that the ProMotion might not be bad. It depends if you like your ProMotion, Dylan. That might not be a bad play. Otherwise, I would bring one medium smooth ball. I'd go between the Pride Dynasty and the Phase 2, whichever one you think rolls better for you. I'd bring one shiny ball. I would go probably a Vibo personally, but if you want, I would just then otherwise pick your favorite of the 3 Vibo Clone or Parallax Effect. And then probably one of the 2 strong smooth balls. I think this Onyx might be a little bit too early for out there, except for doubles and singles. You might not need that much ball, and Eternity Pie might be enough. But you want really, really smooth bowling balls out there, Dylan. Hopefully this helps. If you want your general arsenal built, though, I'd recommend getting a Road Warrior in here or some kind of weaker pearl ball to really round things out. We are kicking off today's arsenal video with Kev. Now, Kev is a rev-dominant, two-handed righty bowler, has a pretty big arsenal here down below, so let's start by putting all of the categories that we know into their respective areas. So we know the purple hammer is urethane, IQ is weak smooth. We're doing this just to showcase, just to put balls into categories so we have a starting point and ones we've already covered before. So we try to get one in every single category and then we move on from there. We've talked about the raw being a weak and sharp ball, and there we'll put the Beyond Infinity that we know is a strong and sharp ball. All right, so first things first, Kev has a really well-rounded 7 bowling balls right here, which is awesome. We have the Ion Max, Beyond Infinity, Phase 2, Zen, IQ Tour, Raw, and the Purple Slammer. So let's go through the rest of the balls. Reminder that the further left a bowling ball is on our scale, the stronger it is in that category. So if we have an Ion Max here and say we had another ball to the right of it, that means the Ion Max hooks earlier than the ball to the right of it. So let's get it going. We have the Hustle Camo, a very, very old Hustle ball. It's probably about 4 years old at this point, 3 to 4 years old. I like to have that one in the weak and smooth category. It is a very smooth ball at the end of the day and way later than the IQ Tour. We see a Track Theorem, as we've covered in our Brunswick guide. The Track Theorem is later than a Beyond Infinity. Teal Rhino Pro. This thing is interesting. I think the Teal Rhino is actually fairly close to a Hustle, but I think it is a little bit earlier. That Teal Rhino does want to hook super late, but it's also insanely smooth. However, it doesn't hook as late as a Hustle ball. Next up, we're going to the OG High Road, one of the oldest bowling balls in production today. That is definitely in the weak and sharp category, and it is earlier than a Raw, especially with that hybrid cover stock. All right, we have the Vibo. That's a very interesting one. The Vibo is fairly close to the Beyond Infinity. I think in another life, they are very, very close together. But we're going to put the Vibo a little bit ahead of the Beyond Infinity. All right, the Effect Tour. So the Effect Tour we've thrown in a few different spots. We've sometimes thrown it in the strong smooth, sometimes in the medium smooth. We're going to put it in medium smooth in front of the phase 2. That's where I have mine personally. That's where a lot of people have theirs. It isn't as early as something like an NV Tour, which we'll cover in just a second. However, it's still super early, but not early enough to really be in that strong and smooth category. Speaking of the NV Tour, that is strong enough to be in the strong and smooth category, so that's where we're going to put it. We have an Optimum Idol Solid. I actually have all three of these bowling balls, which makes this much easier as just personal experience. I see the Optimum Idol as later than the Effect Tour. However, it is also smoother, which is kind of interesting. All right, we have the One Remix. This thing is weird. This is a hybrid bowling ball. It is that massive, the One Core. So I actually have this a little bit after the NV Tour, but not by much. They're going to hook in about the same part of the lane. That One Remix is just going to be much sharper down lane. All right, we have a blue tank. Ooh, the blue tank was microcell polymer yet, and it was one of the better tanks, if I remember correctly. It does go after the purple hammer, though, because it is not true urethane. Speaking of not true urethane, we have the Rattler NU. I have the Rattler NU as after all of the tank series. It does hook pretty late for being a urethane-like bowling ball, earlier than a new blue, but still later than a lot of the others. Last but not least, we have the Ion Pro, which is going to go in front of all three of the weak and smooth balls we currently have. Again, we are not using Tier Maker. I tried opening it up before this, and my computer wanted to explode, which is great. So, looking at Kev's arsenal, this is arguably the most well-rounded arsenal we've had yet in most of the categories. We have 3 bowling balls in all of the categories almost. The top 3 categories, 3 bowling balls. The bottom 3 categories, we have 4, 2, and 3. Awesome. Very well done. Very awesome. I think a lot of these balls play really well off of each other. I think you have the perfect amount of urethanes. I think having a tank-like bowling ball is a good idea all the time, especially if you're unaffiliated with any ball company. So having Purple Hammer, the best urethane, into a tank ball, pick and choose your favorite tank ball, into a Rattler NU, really cool play. I actually really like that. The only category that's missing is medium sharp, and you have an OG Zen, which is at least 5 years old at this point. So it's getting fairly old, 4 to 3 years, I should say. It was out until about 2022. So I'd recommend another medium sharp ball to go in this slot. Something that could work is like a Road Warrior would fit really well. A Scorpion Strike could fit pretty okay. You mainly have Storm stuff with a little bit of Brunswick stuff mixed in there. So I'd say a Scorpion Strike or a Road Warrior or even a Zen 25 if you want to fully replace that OG Zen will work really, really well. And especially since you're rev dominant, you might like those shiny bowling balls a little bit better on house shots. So those weak and smooth balls probably do really well for you. Those weak and sharp probably do pretty well. The urethanes probably do really well on sport shots. So having a couple medium sharp options might make this really, really good. Other than that, like these are 3 of the best medium smooth balls in my opinion that you can buy. Along with the strong sharp, there's a couple really good ones here. And then strong smooth, you have the Ion and the NV Tour, which is really all you need. That one wasn't the best for a lot of people, but that's still an okay ball at the end of the day. So long story short, Kev, this is an amazing, amazing arsenal. Really well done. I'd recommend 1 or 2 more medium sharp balls, maybe just 1 more, and then you're good to go. The next arsenal up is going to be for Brandon Fleury. Brandon Fleury doesn't have any specs about himself. A-okay. So let's put some bowling balls into a couple of the categories that we already know as per usual. Summit Ascent, medium smooth, Eternity Pie, and the strong smooth. Other things, Sublime as a medium sharp. I think the rest we haven't really hit before, so let's get it going. First of all is going to be this Rotogrip XL. This Rotogrip XL is going to be a strong and smooth ball, but it is the weakest strong and smooth ball that, not Brunswick, Storm has to offer right now. Apologies. Talking about a ball that hooks in your backswing is going to be the Pitbull Growl. That thing hooks super, super early. Very strong ASIM. The original Deviate Collision. Interesting. I haven't seen this ball in the hottest of minutes. I'm going to put the original Collision after the Pitbull, but before the Eternity Pie. The Collision line hooks really early, no matter the cover stock. So I really see it after the Pitbull, because that Pitbull hooks so, so early. We have a Trek Cypher coming up next. We know that is a medium and smooth ball. I'm going to put it before the Summit Ascent. They're kind of close. They're kind of close in terms of how early they hook. The Cypher has a much stronger cover and a weaker core, and then the Summit Ascent has a much stronger core, much weaker cover. So I'm going to go Cypher into Summit Ascent. Next, we have the Medusa. The Medusa was a high RG, medium differential, a weak asymmetrical ball. I think it's going to hook after the OG Sublime. I think it is also a hybrid. Katana Assault definitely comes well before the Theorem. That was a Pearl Katana, massive core, Pearl cover stock though. Honey Badger Revival is another one I haven't seen in a minute. I believe this was the first ball that Storm poured for 900 Global when they got bought out by Storm. I'm going to put it after everything. That Honey Badger series hooked really, really late. And then we have the OG Zen. OG Zen is going to come in front of everything because it always goes Zen into a Sublime. So, Brandon, looking at your arsenal, you have your strong smooth really covered and your medium sharp really covered. The one issue is there's a lot of older bowling balls that might be dying soon. So in your strong smooth, you might see that collision and the Pitbull slowly wearing away. You're going to have the Pi and the XL to match it though, which is A-okay. And then medium sharp category, the only one, none of these balls are actually in production anymore. That Sublime is the newest, but it was poured over a year ago. So that one's getting close to being pretty old, but really not too bad. The Medusa and the Revival are pretty old though. Those are pretty old bowling balls. Otherwise, medium smooth, your Summit Ascent and Cypher are a little close together. You could get something stronger like a Phase 2 to pair with it. Strong sharp, I think you're good to go if that Katana Assault still has some games left. You don't really need weak and smooth. I don't know your play style exactly, but if you realize that your Summit Ascent or Cypher just hook way too early and way too much, then you could go with like an IQ Tour or a Max Thrill Solid or something like that. Otherwise, I really, really hope this helps. A very unique arsenal. I haven't seen a couple of these balls in a hot minute. So thank you for opening my eyes back up to a couple of these. And our next arsenal up is from Chandler. Chandler does not, oh yeah, right-handed balance. Apologies. Chandler's a right-handed balance bowler. Not too many bowling balls here, but there are some interesting ones. So let's begin. Let's put some bowling balls into categories that we know they fit. Quick reminder, the further left the ball is on the list, the earlier it is going to hook. So the one interesting thing is a lot of these bowling balls are older, and Chandler made sure to say this Primal Rage is not the evolution. This is the OG Primal Rage back from like 2015 or 16. But now we have a lot of bowling balls we've never seen before because they are all very old. Starting off, Black Widow Gold. This is a pearl version of the OG Black Widow, if I'm not mistaken. That's going to be a strong and sharp bowling ball. Very, very interesting. That might have fallen down to medium sharp with today's technology, but because most of these bowling balls are older, we'll keep it in the strong sharp where it was when it was first poured. Oh, my baby, the Sherlock. I loved the Sherlock so much. I'm sad that mine ended up pooping out on me. That is a strong and smooth bowling ball, though. If you want something like it right now, I'd say the RST Hyperdrive is fairly close. We have a Covert Revolt. Covert Revolt was super, super early and super, super slow. I'm going to put it in the strong and smooth category. It reminds me of a Sub-Zero Forge at the end of the day. I think the Sherlock hook's just a little bit earlier. Next, we have the Primal Fear. Primal Fear, I think, goes right before... Oh, I did not mean to move that guy. I think the Primal Fear actually goes right before the Primal Rage. I think they were very similar bowling balls, though. Finally, we have the Jackal LE. This is the remake to the banned Jackal. The original Jackal was banned for having too high of a differential and almost put Motiv out of business at the time because they were very new and that ball was doing really, really well. So, Chandler, this is where I see all the bowling balls fitting. Overall, perfectly well-rounded arsenal. You have a few extra strong and smooth balls. That's A-okay. But there are a lot of bowling balls on here that are a little bit older, and it looks like you like Motiv quite a bit. So, the easy options for replacements, Primal Rage with a Primal Rage Evolution. If you want a Jackal LE, get the Jackal Onyx. If you want the Covert Revolt, go get a Sub-Zero Forge. If you want the Black Widow Gold Pearl, go get a Black Widow Mania. So there are really good replacements for all of these bowling balls if you really like their reactions but need something newer because your old one is too oil soaked at this point. So if you need to do that, you have great options. Otherwise, very, very well-rounded arsenal. At the end of the day, nice job. Next person up is Daryl, who is speed dominant. We have a couple weird ones in this list. So I see a Theorem. We'll put that in strong sharp. I see an original Summit in the medium smooth territory. Sub-Zero Forge we know is strong smooth. I see an Arctic Vibe, which is always weak smooth, and I see an IQ Ruby, which is always weak and sharp. Now we have a couple interesting ones coming up. We're going to save these first two for the end. We have a Summit Ascent coming up next. That comes well after the medium smooth. It should go like right there compared to the Summit because they are very different bowling balls, even though the Summit Ascent is a solid of the group. The Atlas Hybrid definitely comes before the Theorem Pearl, definitely well before the Theorem Pearl in terms of hook. And the Black Widow comes after the Sub-Zero Forge. So now let's look at the weird ones. We have an original Virtual Gravity, which came out in the early 2010s, and we have a Hypercell Skid. Now, the Hypercell Skid was in this strong and sharp category, and I think it will technically fit right about there if it's in okay condition, but the ball is 15 plus years old at this point, so I don't know how it's going to react. Same with this Virtual Gravity. The Virtual should technically be right here between the Sub-Zero and the Black Widow, but this ball is a billion years old and it might be too oil soaked to actually hook in that part of the lane, so it very much could come after it. But this is where we're at right now for you, Daryl. You said you're speed dominant, which is a-okay, so you have the top part of your lineup pretty well covered right now. The only thing I would recommend is something in this medium sharp category. Looking at what you have a lot of Storm and a lot of Brunswick, so you could go like a Scorpion Strike, a Zen 25, an Optimum Pearl, something like that could fit in that medium and sharp slot, so it could fit right below your Theorem or right below your OG Summit. Otherwise, it doesn't look too bad. Hopefully you take these tips and let me know what new ball you get next if you do. Our next arsenal is from David, who is a house shot bowler, speed dominant. So we have a handful of bowling balls here. Let's throw them into the right categories. Starting off with the Revenant. This is a weird one. I'm going to put it in the weak sharp category. It was a remake of the Spectre. It's very, very weak, but also very smooth. It almost could fit in that weak and smooth category, but I think we'll keep it in weak and sharp for now. We have a Phase 2 medium smooth. Idol Cosmos was the Pearl Idol Helios. What else have we put in place? As Exotic Gem we know is a strong sharp ball, and then we'll leave it at that. So next up is an Axiom Pearl. Ooh, I'm going to put the Axiom Pearl after the Idol Cosmos, but they are very similar bowling balls at the end of the day. They are very, very close. The Axiom Pearl is a little more forward, where the Idol Cosmos is a little rounder once it starts hooking. Axiom Solid. I always saw the Axiom Solid as a medium smooth ball right above the Phase 2 is how I always saw it. You can change the surface of the Axiom much easier to make it whatever you want it to be, but I think it goes Axiom into a Phase 2. Next up is a DNA Coil. That definitely goes after the Exotic Gem, much weaker than the Exotic. We have an Omega Crux. I'm putting the Omega Crux in strong smooth territory. It is a very smooth bowling ball. Even though it's a pearl, it is absurdly smooth. And it is earlier than that Exotic Gem too. Next, we have a Clone. I'm going to put the Clone after the DNA Coil. I think they hook it around the same part of the lane. The Coil is just a little sharper down lane. And then we have an RSTX1. I'm going to put the RST after the Omega. That Omega hooks so bloody early compared to other bowling balls. So that's really where I'm going to see it. So David, looking at your arsenal, it honestly is very well-rounded. Very, very good arsenal overall. You have a couple more strong sharp balls, which is good because you only bowl house shots and you're speed dominant. So you're going to like this style of bowling ball up here. There's a couple of older bowling balls on here, like the medium sharp balls. These are each at least 3 to 4 years old, so you might have to replace them. Optimum Idol Pearl is going to be your best bet to be close to both of those. Otherwise, if you can find a Summit Peak, the Axiom Pearl and the Summit Peak are also very close together. Otherwise, I like your medium smooths. Your strong smooths are a little old also. Physics Blackout could fit here, even though that's more of a strong sharp ball. But otherwise, I think that's where I would put everything, David. So overall, very well-rounded. You don't have any weak smooth, weak sharp, but as a speed dominant bowler and only house shots, you don't really need it at the end of the day. So let's go on to the next one.